Welcome to On Topic Retro, episode 17. I'm John Cummins, and joining me tonight is Chris Logel. And tonight we will be talking about Comic Zone, which was the October Retro Rewind community voted game. So this is one that I reached out, and apparently Chris is the only one that played it with me. So how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing great, John. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is a Sega classic, and it's a dang shame that I couldn't get more people that wanted to play it because it's not a very long game. I even threw out on Discord that using the NSO app with Rewind, you can just kind of breeze right through this game for the most part. It's only very short, not very long. So anyway, just us, and that's just fine. We'll tackle this thing and we won't miss anybody. We'll be just fine.
When you put this out for voting for the monthly Retro Rewind game, I remember thinking like, okay, so Comic Zone stuck out to me as one that I didn't have growing up, and I thought I heard a lot of people really excited about it. So I thought we'll get some people playing, and I'll be able to maybe learn about one of those hidden gems I didn't have growing up. So I was really excited, but I was actually surprised when you told me that we wouldn't be able to get anybody else on.
Yeah, I mean, I put out the survey and nobody signed up, and then I reached out a few times on Discord and still didn't really have anybody interested. So it's just you and me, but that's fine because we've got plenty to talk about with this one. We should be able to do it just fine. So go ahead and I'll let you talk a little bit about your experiences first. I think you just played this one for the first time, so you might have a little more fresh perspective on it.
Yeah, when we were voting for the game, someone threw out their beat 'em up Comic Zone. I thought, all right, beat 'em up games are one of my go-to genres growing up. I was a big Streets of Rage fan, and so I thought comics and video games, I love both of those things, and so I'm going to give this one a go. I think the concept is really unique. I like playing in a comic book, right? Like the going from panel to panel, and the story less so much because it's really just. I almost kind of wish this was a Marvel or a DC game with recognizable comic book characters.
Yeah.
And then maybe the story would have meant something more, but definitely the genre, the concept is really kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely. I mean, I don't know. I think they were trying to kind of give it its own spin, and comics was just kind of the inspiration. But I mean, just having like Unknown Mutants is kind of weird. Whenever you already had so many, comic series going on at this time, DC or Marvel or whatever you wanted to choose from. I mean, even stuff like Dark Horse had comics out by then, and there was, all kinds of inspiration. I don't think they wanted to try to get a license for any of that stuff. They just wanted to put out a fun game.
Yeah, I feel like if you try to get an established comic property in here, that means it's another person who's going to have input on your game, and you won't get to make the game you really want. So to make up your own story is easier.
Yeah, and I mean, they and we'll get into this in a little bit, but they kind of had some problems like trying to get this one across to Sega Japan and get things rolling with initial feedback coming in. So they definitely, I mean, I don't know if it would have been any easier if they had licensed characters, but it might have been. But I could definitely see where they wanted to go their own route. And you said you played this both on the NSO app and on the Genesis Classics for Switch, right?
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I meant to try it on an emulator, but I never got around to it because I wanted to see if the without rewind if that was going to change anything. But I would play through without rewind and just die. And there were some frustrating parts of the game where if I'm wailing on an enemy, I don't lose any health, but then I start wailing on a barrel, and I do, and I was Yeah,
You take damage from punching
right.
breakable objects. It's kind of weird,
It seemed
but
like
it
the
is what
whole
it
game was
is.
just it was a it was really a case of survival of the fittest to just see how
Yeah.
long you could not die.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that hurt you in the game, and then to make the inanimate objects hurt you as well was kind of rough.
It's kind of piling on, to be honest.
And some of them are just like damage sponges too. Like you can
Yeah,
sit there and like kick at them forever, and they
right.
won't blow up.
Or I made the mistake of blowing up a box and then, oh well, don't do that. That's an exploding kill you.
Yeah, yeah, you definitely have to pay attention to which boxes and things that you're hitting. You don't want to. If you punch explosives and they blow up on you, you're gone. Different boxes are labeled as explosive. I think they have like an exclamation mark on them, or you know something like that.
I mean, I did learn my lesson later. I did. We mentioned the pre-show. I got to episode 2. We got to a part where there's a box and then there's an obstacle. I thought, hey, wait a minute. If that thing will kill me, that'll probably also get that thing out of my path, and I can blow it up that way. So that was kind of a neat lesson. By
Yeah,
death, learning by
death
death.
teaches.
Right? Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. There's so many things, and even though I played this a little bit as a kid, I forgot the majority of the things that I played. I remember the rat, and I remember some of the bad guys. But overall, it was like playing a brand new game for me. Uh, and it's one of those things. I sat down because I thought this game was going to take a lot longer. Because I was thinking, I played it as a kid. I never beat it, so I just poured hours into it and never got anywhere. And then I just was playing. I was playing something else on the couch, and I was like, you know what? I still need to play this game for this month. I probably ought to get started. And I just sat down and knocked it out in like an hour and a half, uh, using the rewind function on the Switch. And I will say the game is much more enjoyable if you're not dying every 5 seconds and like you can fix your mistakes as you make them. The rewind function definitely makes it more palatable for modern game play.
I mean, the thing
But
about beat 'em up like a Streets of Rage is you could just go through the game, and after a while, you can get a bit repetitive just by constantly punching, punching, kicking away at any problem. But this game will throw a wrench in, and I like when I reached out to you yesterday, I'm stuck, John. What do I do? And you you know mentioned, oh, there's another element. There's kind of a puzzle element where you have these 3 items. You need to save them for when it's going to get
yep,
you out of or going to get you out of a bind that you're in. So, like maybe a puzzle element that kind of makes it a little more interesting than just constantly, punching things.
yeah, and I mean they don't even tell you anything. Like they don't tell you to pick up items. They don't tell you. You could totally leave the rat. Like you don't even have to pick him up. It's not like he just comes and runs and jumps in your bag. Like you have to pick him up at the beginning of the level to have him. So I mean, there's totally things you can miss, and if without the rat, you miss out on like half of the items throughout the whole rest of the levels. So it definitely gets tricky. Um, it does have a little bit of a puzzle element. There's definitely some things like you have to move some boxes to reach things. Sometimes you're moving boxes to blow up obstacles, like you mentioned. They're just uh, they make you think, and the AI of the enemies is pretty good. Like they block quite a bit, so like they're not just pushovers. This isn't like Ninja Turtles on NES, where you're blasting away at foot soldiers and they just take a couple hits. Like some of these enemies take a few hits to take down, and you have to learn their patterns, which is where rewind comes in. You learn them a lot faster when you can do them instantaneously over and over again instead of dying, and then you have to get back to that part of the level again.
I had a bit of Street Fighter flashback where because I remember my experience in a game like Street Fighter was just attempting to hit someone. I was sort of like Neo in the Matrix before he figured everything out, and he was just
Yep.
kept getting punched and thrown back. That was me, and so I figured out eventually the I think one of the enemies literally says, up to down, like keep moving around and hitting, so you're not just constantly hitting on the same location because otherwise they'll just block and kill you.
Oh yeah.
So like a Street Fighter I was never very good at. So I took a couple of rounds of practicing different moves so that I wasn't just doing the same attack every time.
Yeah, you definitely got to jump over the enemies, use the uppercut. There's jump kick. Like there's a pretty good amount of moves that was it Sketch Turner has in his little skill set. So
Yeah.
one thing that I feel like this game is missing is I really wish that you could pick up like um, weapons and use them like all the time. I mean, you could pick up bombs and you could pick up knives, but the knife is a throwing weapon. You know, it's kind of similar to maybe even like a Castlevania style, to where like most of the things you pick up are projectiles.
Yeah.
So this game works very similar in that fashion, except for you don't get a weapon at all. So you're just you're just punching and kicking. I think it would be kind of neat if they would let you have like the ability to pick up like a pipe or like a baseball bat, or take some of the enemies that have staffs. Like if you could take their staff from them and fight with it, that'd be kind of neat too.
Yeah, that's the option. Like in the Streets of Rage, you pick up a weapon. At least in two,
Mm-hmm.
I remember I'd pick up a pipe. I could wail on a couple people with a metal pipe, and then when I get tired of it, I just huck it at the next person,
Yeah,
and I look pretty cool because like, yeah, I'm like
yeah,
an
it
action
looks like a
hero here.
projectile.
Yeah, I'm an
Yeah,
action hero here. I'm done with this weapon. I'm ready to move to the next one, and then I'll
yep.
stab somebody a couple of times. I'll throw the knife when I'm done with it. Here, I got that same kind of thing. Like, okay, I've got a knife. This enemy's about to kill me. I pressed it thinking I was just going to use a stabbing motion. It throws it, and I'm like, oh, now I'm done. And of course, the
Well,
next
yeah,
he killed me.
it and the throwing of the knife. That I can't tell that it even does any more damage than like a
Right?
normal punch.
It
You
doesn't.
throw the knife and it still takes like 25 more hits to
Yeah,
take out the enemies.
like some sort of horror. It's Halloween, and some kind of horror villain that you could stab in the face, and then it would still come at you for 10 minutes.
Yep. Well, they are mutants, so
It's true.
it maybe makes sense.
But I guess the part that really threw me was uh, in episode one. There's a room with glass tubes, and so the mutants leak out into the ground and form as these
Yeah.
green mutants, and they're just punching bags. And you're sitting there like, again, you're wailing on them for about a
You have
good
to try to finish them before all of them come out.
right. But then I go to then I got killed with the box in the next panel because I didn't have any life left, and I'm wailing on a box. And I just pounded on that green mutant for 10 minutes, and I'm fine.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, I think we've already been getting kind of into the meat and potatoes of the game, so we'll go ahead and move on to the discussion of the game a little bit. We'll start with the overview. This game was released by Sega for the Sega Genesis on August 2nd of 1995 in North America, September 1st, 1995 in Japan, and Europe would have to wait until October 27th of 1995. And then Australia also gets it 95. I don't see a month or a day. And then apparently this was released on Windows 95 in North America and Europe, which I did not know that there was a computer version. And then apparently way later, the Game Boy Advance would get a version of this in Europe on September 11th. So yeah, the 1 year anniversary of 9/11, you get a copy of Comic Zone for the Game Boy Advance in Europe. But yeah, so this game didn't really go very far. Didn't get a sequel. There just really wasn't a whole lot of there wasn't a lot of clout around it. I don't even know that it was really received all that well when it came out. I always heard it was like hard as nails. A lot of people complained about the difficulty. To the fact that I think even the during playtesting, they kind of told the team that it was too easy and that they needed to up the difficulty. So they did that, and then I think it kind of backfired on them and ended up making it too difficult for the average player to enjoy. Which this is the kind of game that you want everyone to enjoy. Like it doesn't need to be that difficult. Uh, maybe tone it down a little bit. Maybe make the enemies absorb like half the amount of hits that they normally do. Because I mean, you can just some of those later enemies, you just sit and wail on them, and they just don't die. Like I don't know, I don't even know how many hits they take.
And the Genesis screen, the title screen opens up. It's a classic Genesis game where it's got your start the game and options. And a lot of the games that I'm used to on Genesis, like I think when you're going to play X-Men or Streets of Rage, you go in there and there's always the difficulty setting, and there's always an easy, a normal, and a hard. And this game would be so easy to make an easy mode and a hard mode, like we were talking about. Make the objects not kill you. I want to punch a wall over and over again. Just let me punch the wall.
This game needs the Sega Ages treatment, where they go in and make some quality of life improvements and re-release it.
Right, and you could. That was so easy to scale down the difficulty so that you're not dying all the time, and so people could get to the end of the game.
Yeah, it would be nice.
It's almost like you go into this comic book and the air is toxic and you're breathing poison or something, and you're constantly.
In some of the areas, it looks like you are, but
so
you're breathing in some toxic monster.
It would totally improve the game, I think, to make it a little bit easier. And then if you want to upscale the difficulty, you can add those in a normal and a hard mode.
Yeah, because I mean, like you said, if you get done in one panel and you lost the majority of your life fighting an enemy, and then go to the next panel and you have to eliminate an object that's in your way, and you don't have enough life to even destroy it, you basically have to start over again. Like it's game over because the inanimate object will kill you.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about that because I know there's a couple of times where I would go out of a panel, and I think it was halfway through episode 2, and then I'm at the door of the temple, I think, and so I've literally scraped by with almost zero life. And like you said, the first thing I think I had to move an object or there was an enemy, tap me a little bit, dead. End of the story. And I think you get one continue.
Yeah,
one continue, and then over again, and at least when they continue, now you start where you left off with a full bar health. But it's super frustrating because this was the thing I always had to strategize, and I hate bringing up Streets of Rage 2 but it is my favorite game. I will say, like if I'm playing, I'm at the boss, and I can see the turkey on the ground, and I'm starting to strategize or at least hover around it. That I'm gonna wait to the most optimal time when I'm low on life to fill it up again, so that I can I can finish this boss, and then of course as soon as the boss is done, everything resets, and now I'm gonna start the level refreshed and with the full bar. And a lot of the times where I was in this game, I would get to where I thought was an endpoint, get to the next screen, and it's like, oh no, you're still almost dead. And a feather will land on your forehead and you're dead. And you're like, are you kidding me? Like what?
They would have even made it just to where you get half your health back, after a panel would have been nice. It would have been something. At least it would have guaranteed you had enough health to take out an obstacle that's in the next panel, But
I don't want to sound like I'm ragging on the game because, like I said, there was unique parts about it. It made it added something to the beat 'em up that wasn't just punching bag, but there was also some things that were super frustrating, and you had to be really persistent with this one, and you had to really want to, you had to block everything out of my mind. This isn't the one where I'm going to put the football game on the background or whatever. I'm going to be 100% into Comic Zone. I'm not doing anything else. Kids, I can't talk to you for the next hour.
I'm Comic Zone in it.
I'm in Comic Zone.
Yes. So a little bit about the development of this game, and some of this will make sense a little bit as we're going through. Comic Zone was conceived by Sega, the Sega Technical Institute, which is STI for short. There was a programmer there named Peter Morwick, and Morwick was an avid comic fan, and that's kind of how we, get to the base of this. He's kind of working on this as a project, and it was his idea from the beginning, and uh, and you could kind of see it. But states that the main inspiration for this game is from a music video you're probably familiar with, but "Take on Me" by the band Aha,
Yep.
where the panels are coming to life, and you could really see it whenever you're playing the game, because like as you're going from one panel to the next, like things are being drawn in. The enemies aren't just there, like they're being drawn in as you're playing, and that kind
Yeah.
of goes in. We'll talk a little bit about the story here in a little bit, and it'll make more sense. But
I was reading your notes yesterday, and I couldn't I couldn't play the game without having aha in my head. I'll be
yeah,
honest with you. Do, 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 do,
it'd
do.
be funny if they could have got the music rights for that. But
I think it was. I mean, it's unfortunate because I think aha would have been better music than what they used.
mm-hmm.
I'm not really crazy about the soundtrack or the sound effects of the game, so
No,
so playing aha in my head was sort of made it better.
yeah. And then another note here: the original protagonist was his name was going to be Joe Pencil, and he was going to be a nerdy kid based on the usual trope in comics where you have like a teenager that gets superpowers, however, like bit by a spider or whatever, he's just the nerdy little kid, and he becomes powerful,
Yeah,
overnight.
this dude's way too cool for school to be honest to be drawing comic books in the '90s.
Yeah, exactly. And then, Morwick pitches the game to Sega of America's CEO, Tom Kalinske, and he liked it. But but apparently, like, whenever they started production and get the Sega Japan involved, and he's kind of showing what he has, and they don't like it. They're like, no, we we don't really like the name or the character. Then and they're starting to make their nitpicking and ask for changes. Um, and that's how we get the kind of grunge rocker turned hero character of Sketch Turner. He has to get a cool, 90s almost like detective name, you
Yeah,
know.
and he looks like he's got the flannel I think tied around his waist. It's like
Sunglasses and the
sunglasses.
mullet.
Yeah, I didn't get it. The character is like, is he from Seattle and is he playing in a grunge band? I don't get. Yeah, no. You went a little raw. I think if you went with the nerdy kid, I would have bought it more, especially because he has a little moment at the end of each panel where he transformed into the muscular superhero with the
And
cape.
the superhero.
Right? That's a comic book nerd, not a. He's not going to
Yeah.
see Pearl Jam at
Yeah.
Coachella, whatever, right?
Yeah, that's who the protagonist of this game is actually Eddie Vedder. They just drew him into comic book form. Uh, so Sega also had another ask. They wanted him to add a sidekick to the game, which is pretty common in the '90s, 16-bit era. Like when you have Donkey Kong and Diddy, and like Mario and Yoshi. Even Mario gets a sidekick. At this point in time. So these were games are starting to become more predominantly two players, even though this game is not two players. But you get a little sidekick, and so he comes up with a little rat that he adds to the game, and I thought it was kind of cool, like what his thought process was. He since he didn't want to have a sidekick in the first place, he made sure he picked a animal, or a sidekick that wasn't going to be very flashy or take up much room on the screen. In fact, you don't even see him most of the time. He's kind of an item more than a sidekick. Uh, but yeah, it was just kind of a way to push back, I guess. But so they get the rat, and then they would start, doing the full development cycle of the game. The team would use comic panels drawn in ink and pencil and scan them into a computer to create the comic aesthetic that the game has. And the artist, Tony DeZuniga, I think, or DeZuniga, I don't know I'm butchering this guy's name, I'm sure.
That's all right.
He was I'm trying to remember, he was already a comic book artist. Um, and I'm trying to remember some of the comics that I seen that he was the artist for, but he had done quite a few things. So he was probably a pretty hot commodity to get for the game at that time. And I'm sorry for comic book fans. I'm not a big comic book guy. Otherwise, I would know this guy, I'm sure. Um, they got him to draw the opening and closing sequences of the game. So all uh, the artwork that you see at the beginning, because I mean, this doesn't really have cinematics. It's a 16-bit game, but all the cinematic pixel art that's made for the game is stuff that he drew and they scanned in to make it like a cartoon almost. Which is kind of, this game would have made like a really cool like Saturday morning cartoon. I think. I
I
get
feel like though that with the character changes, I don't know. It might have been a bit over. Like it would not have aged well because they would have made
Oh
it
no,
290s with the, like you said, with the grunge look, and the if they made them the comic book nerd, maybe that reference
but
still.
there's plenty of early '90s Saturday morning cartoons that only went one season. I could see this being one of those.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean,
and
and
then
back to the
oh, go ahead.
comic book element of the game, like I always found it odd that you would punch through a wall or punch through a door, and then instead of going through the doorway to the
You
next,
just jump around the
you
border.
jump around the border, and you're like, well, what the hell did I punch the door for?
Yeah, why is there even a door here?
Why is the door? What did the door didn't matter? I still went around the panel.
Yeah, yeah. And then the last thing of note here is, this game would see several delays. Uh, but I mean, they couldn't even start this game until uh, they got the STI group for Sega kind of got brought in to do Sega Spinball. So they even had to get that done before they could even start. But due to several delays, this game wouldn't release till the very end of like Sega's Genesis life cycle, which kind of hurts it also. If
I'll
this game
say
would have came out earlier, we might have been able to, you know, maybe see a sequel at some point. But I think by the time that the Saturn started rolling around, that they weren't interested in making these kind of games at that point. We'll go ahead and move on and talk a little bit about the story of the game. So as we mentioned, we have a uh, freshly designed, uh, approved character by the name of Sketch Turner. He's a starving artist, freelance rock musician living in New York City. Which again, he's totally dressed like he would be in Seattle, not New York.
I like how, and they have to, and that's where I feel like they pumped up his like backstory where they're like, oh, but he's also cool and in a rock band, or like, no, those people don't draw comic books. I'm sorry,
No,
the nerd
yeah,
in
and I
me,
love how
like,
he's a freelance
actually,
rock
he's not
musician.
yeah, I'm actually us nerds don't freelance in rock bands.
But anyway, he's living in New York City and he's working on his newest comic book, Comic Zone, and it's the story of the New World Empire's attempt to defeat Earth from an invasion of alien renegades, uh, with inspiration coming from Sketch's oddly vivid dreams and nightmares. One night, while Sketch is working on Comic Zone during a thunderstorm, a lightning bolt strikes a panel of his comic. And in this instant, its main villain, a powerful mutant named Mortis, escapes the comic book pages, desiring to kill Sketch. So he becomes a flesh and blood takeover. Oh, whoa, hold on. He becomes flesh and blood and takes over the real world because he does not possess any power in reality. Mortis sends Sketch into the world of his own comic, freely drawing enemies and attempting to kill him. So this is kind of where I was getting at the as you're kind of making your way through the game and going from panel to panel, you start noticing like the enemies are being like drawn in as you're hitting certain parts of the panel. They're not just automatically there. So like you can't just memorize where they're at and go back. Like he's like drawing them in.
Yeah,
It's kind of funny.
there's a couple of times where I would finally get the death cry of one villain or one enemy, and then all of a sudden, as soon as the pencil, you're like, oh no, there's more.
Okay.
No.
And then inside the comic book, Sketch meets General Alyssa Cyan, who believes that he's the chosen one and who has came to save their post-apocalyptic world from the evil Mortis and the alien invaders. Uh, Ignoring Sketch's protest, Alyssa sends him on his mission, keeping in touch with instructions and hints via radio. It is up to Sketch to stop Mortis's evil plans and find a way out of this comic world. So the whole premise of the comic is kind of cheesy. Like it's all right. It's a video game
I'll say
story.
I'll say the setup for Mortis was pretty epic because you see this big cutscene at the beginning.
Yep.
He's there. He's very imposing, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna kill him." And then they throw you. And General Alyssa, I think I skipped over it the first time by mistake because I was getting kind of like, "Okay, all right, I want to get to the punching part." And they drop you in the room with her, and I almost skipped all the. I skipped the first three items because I didn't even really notice them on the ground, and I didn't sit there and wait to talk to her. So I missed a lot of information that was going to be key to me getting anywhere in the game, and I went and instantly got killed, and then realized, oh wait, take it slower and see what she has to say first. And yeah, like again, because this is a new character that I don't have any connection with, the story didn't totally grab me, and that's why I skipped parts of it at the beginning. But for if you're playing for the first time, slow down and take it all in, just so you don't miss anything.
Yeah, that is kind of the only real interaction you really have to worry about at the beginning. So yeah, go ahead and take your time and get through that part and learn all the things that you need to at the beginning. After that, you'll have plenty of time to punch enemies and objects and all the stuff.
Yeah,
So yeah,
and
this is.
the death
Oh, go
scene,
ahead.
as much as you get frustrated with dying, is like, haha, I have a real body now, and I'm going to take over the world. I'm like, this is kind of cool. I kind of want
Yeah,
to see where this goes.
yeah. The idea of the bad guy is pretty cool. Like the whole thing where like the comic book gets struck by lightning is kind of weird, but
That seems like a
it's all
very
right.
90s thing that would have happened, though.
Yes, very 90s. Um, so yeah, you're fighting Mortis, and at one point you think they seem like they're mutants, but I guess they're aliens. Like they're like blob guys. Like sometimes, like there's just all kinds of different things going on. Uh, yeah.
Yeah,
So it's
I was struck by the variety. Like you've got big hulking red aliens, and then you've got small green blobs and these white flying. Those things were the most irritating. Those,
yes, little scorpion flying
yeah,
things.
they
Yeah.
were not. I hated that. I had to rewind about thousands of times because it would just time it right to stab me with a stinger and then get away. And you're like, oh,
Yep. Yeah. So that's the basic story of Comic Zone. So yeah, let's go ahead. We can hop into the gameplay a little bit. We've already talked quite a bit, so this one will probably go a little quicker. But so as we've been mentioning, it's a action platformer beat 'em up. Um, there's there's a lot less platforming, although there are some areas where like you're hanging from stuff and like There's definitely some things you have to jump over, and there's choices that you have to make between panels. Like if you're playing through the second level, you can skip like a third of it if you choose to go down instead of going to the right, I believe. If you go
I
to the right,
instantly, I instantly regretted a lot of my choices in this game. I felt like this was
yes,
something where like I did I went route A and like, oh, that was not a good idea.
yeah, I think it's in World Two is like the biggest one. Like I think if you go right, you basically go over two panels, down a panel, and then back over two panels, and you get to the panel that you would have went to if you would have just went down. So,
Yeah.
like I said, you skip a good portion of the hard enemies if you just do that. You might miss out on a couple items, but uh, you won't need the items because you've already skipped all the really hard bad guys. So I just thought that was kind of funny. Um, it, you you actually end up like having to wait. You have to kill all the enemies before you can move on to the next panel. So choosing your panels wisely helps.
I don't know if this was a conscious choice, but I don't remember any other game where a bottle of water revived your life. And I was like,
Yes.
is this like a health lesson? Like kids, remember,
Yes.
drink your water.
Sounds like it. Yes.
No ever video game ever did that. It was always
No.
meat or food or a milk maybe, but never water. Stay
Nope.
hydrated, kids, and you can beat up aliens.
That's right. Surprised there's not like a Captain Planet in the end of this thing. He would have totally fit in the game. I mean, without any issues. Um, yeah. So as I mentioned, you have Roadkill the Rat, and he can help you find items. You can release them in. As I was telling Chris earlier, I think before we started the show, you can use Roadkill like several times. Like you can let him out, and then whenever he's done searching a panel, you just pick him up, and then you'll have him again for later. Certain panels have uh, dangerous obstacles in them. If you send him out, he'll just like kind of like run into them until he dies.
Well, and
Which
the funny part was, I wanted to ask about this. Um, so I would release the rat one panel too late when I was at the obstacles of death,
yep,
and so I realized after a couple of times he charging at the spike that no, I'm gonna kill the rat, pick him back up so you can keep him for later,
yep,
and you there's a bubble that says good job roadkill. You're like he didn't do anything. I just
yeah,
stopped him
pick him
from
up.
killing himself. He didn't
Good
do
job,
anything.
you didn't die.
You didn't do a good job at anything. But the question I wanted to ask, so like a lot of the dialogue, especially at the end of episode one, you change into the hero and he says, "What the expletive just
Yeah,
happened?" And I was wondering, is this something you play with your kids or no? Because you don't want to explain the language.
yeah. I mean, I don't. There's not a whole lot of language in it. My kids probably wouldn't even pay attention long enough. Honestly, they'd probably skip over it. But there definitely is a few in there. I don't know that. Like, it depends on how. Like I would play this with my 13-year-old probably, but probably not my. Yeah, maybe. I mean, my kids are kind of split age difference wise. So I've got babies and then I've got 10-year-olds and up. So I'd probably let my 10-year-olds play it.
I feel like my kids would play a new game. Guess what the swear word was? And I'd be
Yeah.
like, okay, don't do that. No,
Yeah.
we're not
Probably.
playing. Guess the curse word.
Oh man. Yeah. It definitely use the like if you're playing this for the first time after listening to this, definitely use the rat. Like just let him loose in certain panels. You can always pick him up. He will find items. Like he'll kind of scurry over to a part of the panel. You can't see it. Like he'll just go over to it and he'll rip a piece of the panel open and an item will fall out.
I think I did it by mistake a couple of times because I did see that and I thought, oh, cool. It's very meta that he's ripping the page off of the comic book.
Yeah.
And then almost by accident, I didn't put two and two together that something that appeared. I just thought, oh, this is a cool thing that he does, like a Deadpool style, where he's reminding
Breaking
you
the
you're
fourth
in a
wall.
comic book. Yeah, he's breaking the fourth wall. And then
Literally.
there's also a water ball there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So some of these items can be anything as like knives, health. You'll find bombs. Um, The grenades are very handy for obstacles that you don't want to lose all your life trying to take out.
What was the fist? That's one I was never sure about.
Yeah, I don't know what the fit. I don't know that I ever picked up a fist. I don't remember picking one up. That's something I'll have to look up later.
So it's facing down like this. It looks like you're punching
Yeah.
forward. And I was like,
So
is that just like a super punch? I couldn't tell. I'm like, that's not
it
really an
could
item,
be.
more like a power, but
Yeah, I'm not
I
sure.
died before I had a chance to use it. And then I didn't get it back. So
Yeah. And we've already talked about the obstacles. If you punch them, but they cost you your health bar. A lot of times it's unavoidable, though. Like it's just something you have to do. It's part of the level design. There are three main levels, several panels in each of them. I didn't count the panels per level, but like I said, the game's not super lengthy if you know where you're going and you know how to do it. It can definitely be very lengthy if you're having to repeat several panels from dying. And also, just to mention, I let Chris know about this the other day. If you're playing this game, make sure you're playing it with some form of gamepad that has the ability to have 6 buttons. This game was not designed to be played with the original Genesis gamepad that only has 3, because the top 3 buttons are how you use your items in game. So, uh, if you're playing this on Switch, this is really funny too, because the Genesis NSO controller is a 3 button pad.
unless you're in
Which
Japan.
is, yes, unless you're in Japan, then you get the 6 button pad.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, so the one that they supply you can't even really use to play this game. You just have to use like a Pro controller or the Switch itself, a Joy Cons.
Well, after you mentioned that, I thought just for spite, I'm going to try it. And I know that there's the capture button, there's the home button, and then there's a side shoulder button. That brings up the menu,
Yep.
NSO menu. So yeah,
Yeah, the two
it is.
ZR and ZL bring up the menu when you
Yeah.
touch them.
So there was no. It didn't help. So and I mean, I tried to find a excuse to use it, but I feel like now after having the expansion pack for over, I think it's for a year now, that a lot of these controllers are just to collect.
They are.
I want the N64 controller. I have the Genesis. I have the NES. I don't think I'm going to get the Super Nintendo. It might be
The
a
the
gift.
Genesis is the only one I didn't buy because I knew that there would be games in there that utilized the 6 button pad. And this is one of them. So
So if we can get the 6 button here, Nintendo, because you're listening, uh,
yeah,
then bring it over here, please.
yes. Hello, everyone. Just wanted to pop in and let you know that the next 3.5, almost 4 minutes of this podcast is going to be a little spoilery and is dedicated to the ending of Comic Zone. So if you do not want to hear how the game ends and want to play it for yourself, you can either use the timestamp included in the description or just skip ahead about 3 minutes and 45 seconds or so up to the fun facts. All right, thanks. And then, of course, you have the final boss fight with Mortis, which is not a particularly challenging boss fight. Like it's all right. It's not really that bad. It's kind of funny. There's actually a switch in like the lower right hand corner, I believe, and if you turn it on, uh, let me lay out the level a little bit, the world that you're in. So there's like a nuclear weapon in the background, like on a rocket, and while you're fighting him, there's like a few platforms, and then there's like those flying scorpion bug things occasionally. So what happens is you can kind of like dodge around and get him to move and follow you, and you get him set into place, and you can hit the switch, and the switch causes the rocket to ignite, and you can damage him using the rocket, which makes the fight a lot faster. You can basically take him out in like 4 or 5 rocket ignitions, uh, and then that starts the uh, end game sequence, which is how you get the 2 endings. Um, so basically, right before the boss fight, he will grab the general and throw her into the rocket. And there's like a little tank on the front, and it's like filling up with fluid. I'm assuming it's like fuel or something. And if you don't finish the boss fight fast enough, it'll fill all the way up and she'll drown. And whenever you defeat the boss, she'll go back to the real world, and the comic will just kind of burn up, and that'll be kind of like the game over. Like that's the bad ending. But if you're able to defeat Mortis with enough time to go back up to the top platform and save her and get her out of there before the tank fills up, you get the good ending where both of you leave the comic and she decides to stay in the real world with you. And she becomes like they even go like as far as to tell you that she becomes like like the attorney general or something, like major. And like they just kind of show him sharing a passionate moment on top of the building where he's at the end. That's the good ending.
I mean, because you're a freelance rock star who also draws
Oh
comics.
yeah,
Exactly the kind of person who you would be romantically involved with is the attorney general.
Attorney General. Yes, of course. Why not? And yes, that kind of closes the game out. And kind of when I first heard that it had multiple endings, I was thinking like, man, what do you have to do in this game to get the other endings? Turns out you just have to rewind and not save the girl. It's how you get the alternate ending. You just sit there and watch her drown in the tank.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about the game, so I wanted to do a bit of research. I looked up the Wikipedia page, and before I realized I was reading about the endings, I'm like, oh, you know what? I didn't need to find this out playing the game. I might not even get this far. So I was like, this sounds really interesting, and I went down the rabbit hole and found out all about how it ended. And again, it was so 90s the way that the good ending or the bad ending.
Yes. Definitely 90s ish. But yeah, so that's basically the gameplay in a nutshell. I've got a few fun facts that we can go through, and then we'll go ahead and close this thing out. So these are really lame fun facts, but they were there, so I grabbed them. If you pause the game for a period of time and you just kind of let it sit, Sketch will say Sega and a speech bubble like comes out. It's kind of funny.
I like the
And
way
it's like
they
Sega logo.
I like the way they put the timestamp when you paused too.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely unique.
Yeah.
And then the other fun fact I have here is that after clearing a panel of enemies, if you press the down button rapidly, this will cause Sketch to fart, which is like just some Sega humor.
Yeah, again, 90s fart jokes. Everyone loves those. Those things will definitely age well.
So yeah, now that you know these things, you can go back into the game and try them out.
I think I got the fart by mistake, and I wanted to make sure I heard what I heard, and I was like, no, that would totally, the character totally farted right there, and I thought,
that's right.
All right, sure.
that's it, man. We're gonna go ahead and close this thing out. I'll give you a chance to, if we've missed anything, you can clean up what we missed, and then after that, you can kind of talk about anything that you got going on or where we can find you.
Well, as usual, John, I wanted to say thanks for letting me come on with you and talk about some retro games. This was a different one because usually you're picking a game that I really love and I'll have all kinds of things to say about it. But this one, being one of those hidden gems I missed growing up, I kind of wanted to experience it, and so it was nice to talk about it. I learned a lot about the game. I really liked giving it a try. I definitely recommend people give this try it. It may not be your cup of tea at the end of the day, but I say give it a whirl. And it's not your dad's beat 'em up. It's unique. It's got a bit of a spin. It's not just punching walls. So go for it. I don't really have anything going on right now, so not much to. I mean, I'll just look forward to the next time I can come and talk retro games with you.
Yeah, you're welcome anytime, man. And for any of those that want to catch you, you're usually hanging around the family of discords that we have going on, which I'll talk about that whenever we close out on how you can find a invitation to join if you're not already a Discord member.
I mean, you're always welcome to join me on Twitter, harassing EA Sports about things. If you want to do that too, I'm Chris Logel on Twitter.
Awesome. All right, man. We're gonna close her out. The next show's game will be X-Men for the Sega Genesis, and so far, I think I just have Shannon coming on for that. I'll have to reach out and see if I can't find some more takers. I know there's lots of guys in the Discord that love X-Men for the Sega Genesis.
I think you can count me in on that one too, because that was one of mine.
Yeah, and I can't remember. Maybe I just gave a copy of it away, so, and I can't remember. Maybe that went to Shannon. I can't remember now.
I think it did.
To look back. Okay.
I mean, the only thing I'll warn you is that if you put Shannon and myself together in a room anywhere and we're talking Marvel, it could go off the rails pretty quick.
And that's just fine. I don't have like a set time length for this show. We just let it go for however long it needs to go.
For everyone who has for everyone who's watching the She-Hulk series on Disney Plus, there's a quick line where she is asking Kevin Feige, and when are we getting the X-Men? And does one of these thumbs up to the screen. So perfect timing for the X-Men episode.
Yes. And we will have a blast talking through that game as well.
Yep.
And that does it for this one, though. Thanks for listening to On Topic Retro, part of the retrologic family of podcasts. Also, in a roundabout way, part of the Nintendo Dads family of podcasts. If you'd like to send in your personal experiences for the next show but don't have Discord, you can send them to ontopicretro@gmail.com. I will field them from there and add them to the notes. If you haven't joined our wonderful non-toxic Retrologic Discord and you would like to, you can visit retrologic.games for details on how to join there. It's free. You don't have to pay a penny to come talk retro games in our Discord. That's it for this episode. Stay tuned for the next one, and we'll see you guys later. Bye now.
Good night. Say the STI is a terrible acronym because I think right now it has a completely different connotation. It's more like an infection you don't want. Like there's a cream for those.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like where I work, that's also a acronym for a short-term incentive, which is the opposite of a of a STD.
Yes, that is. Oh boy.
That's usually what leads to that is a short-term incentive.
Yes, it does. You have to retrieve for it after your incentive.
Yes. Anyway, we got to get out of that. That's not what this
Yeah, yeah.
episode's about.
That's for the
We'll go
post.
ahead and that's for post show.